So, one more time, welcome to IDMonSite. Today with Yasen Georgiev, who is Executive Director of the Economic Policy Institute in Sofia, Bulgaria. Very warm welcome and thank you very much, Yasen. And let's try if everybody can hear you.
Hello again. I hope that everyone is able to hear us both. Very happy to continue with our conversation.
I'm looking into the distance, hoping that you will be, yes, I get a good sign. So anyway, these are the technical challenges that we are facing in isolation at the moment. So Yasen, my first question would be, how is isolation treating you? And especially also, how is isolation treating the Economic Policy Institute? I remember last year when you celebrated the 20th edition of the EPI Summer Seminar, where I had the pleasure to be one of the workshop hosts. There's a wonderful publication. I'm going to put all the links into the video description later on. It was in a beautiful resort on the Black Sea coast. How are the current measures affecting you and your work in Bulgaria, and what is going to happen with the 21st edition of the summer seminar?
Sebastian, thank you very much for the question. For the time being, we are the first month of emergency here in Bulgaria. It has been prolonged by 1 month. So if everything goes right, on May 13, it will be emergency. Until then, schools, kindergarten, and theaters are closed here in Bulgaria. But it's not in a which is a lot in the country. And having in mind all these restrictions and all the situation all over, it is really difficult to organize. Organizations like the Economic Policy Institute have to concentrate mainly on the analytical part of our work, which is also another asset of the situation, because we could take our time out of the daily routine on research and studies. But of course, as you mentioned, our summer seminar for young public officials from South that has been organized by us for 20 years in a row to be postponed from June this year to September this year. And we very much hope that the situation will improve by that time. For the time being, some figures from Bulgaria. We have got 24 reported cases of coronavirus up to today, 24 deaths. And looking at these figures, Bulgaria stays relatively good in comparison to all the other countries with which Bulgaria is neighboring. For instance, North Macedonia has a little bit more cases. Romania more than 42,000 cases. Of course, it is huge to the system, not only to the economy as a whole. And according to the flash estimate, the Bulgarian economy is about to contract by close to 4% in this year. And just to mention here that forecast by the World Bank was for an increase of the economy by 3%, which means that most probably, of course, it very much depends on the length and the duration of the crisis, but most probably the Bulgarian economy will come altogether, let's say, more than 6%. If we assume that the last like estimates, Bulgaria registered a growth of more than 3%, and if we contract by more than 3% this year, it will be 1%.
Yeah. So you've already mentioned some of the measures that Bulgaria is undertaking. You've also compared it to neighboring countries. If you would say, how is the situation, the population accepting these measures? Can we see that there is a change in the rate of the spread of the virus? Does the measures have visible success?
So far, there's a relatively, how to say, Bulgaria was one of the first countries that a state of emergency, and I think the majority of Bulgarians do approve the way the government is handling the situation. In comparison to other countries, we have more or less a controlled growth of in the country. We have like 20 to 30 cases by day, which is relatively low compared to other countries, and I think people very much kind of policy because they see that it gives results. The health system is still not well, and it could absorb the shocks that are supposed to come. And the big concern for sure is what will be the economy, what will be the impact on employment, because for the last 4 months, 4 weeks, excuse me, we have an increase of unemployment. I should say that Bulgaria is a situation with a very good basis, because by the end of last year, the was close to 3%. By the end of the year, unemployment might reach 10%. Time being, there are more than 70,000 people who off because of the crisis so far, and the main sectors that are affected are of course the sectors that have catering, tourism, hospitality, etc. And these are sectors that are very fragile and they do not have any buffers.
Are there any like umbrellas for the economy that the Bulgarian state has started? Is there something for these different sectors that you mentioned?
The government started to work on different schemes in order to support sectors by the crisis, and this kind of measures have it increasing the budget deficit, because for the last years Bulgaria has been always trying to be close to budget surplus, and for this year it is most probably to be, because the country has to be able to cover all the expenses that will emerge. One of the schemes employees, and this total amount of 2.3 billion euro, and most probably over the time. For the time being, there have been also measures directed towards self-employed people, and these people will be able to get unsecured loans up to 760 euro per month to be repaid within the next 5 to 10 years,
wow.
which is relatively good solution. Of course, not all the sectors would this kind of a support towards sectors that are directly affected by the crisis. For all the others, it will be difficult to prove that they have been hit. So I suppose that there will be some companies that will not be able to survive in the long.
So you talked about the budget deficit, which is also partly related to the desire of the Bulgarian government to introduce the euro. So they have already applied for the European exchange rate mechanism. You need to stay there for 2 years. You need to fulfill these Maastricht criteria. Now everything is going to look like that the possibility to join the exchange rate mechanism too in 2021, as it was planned, will not be feasible. What do you think is going to happen?
So it's a long story, and if I could go back to the year 1997, at that time Bulgaria experienced severe economic crisis. Severe economic crisis, I mean more than 300%. That was agreed, and as part of it, introduced the so-called currency board, which implies that at that time the Bulgarian currency was pegged with a fixed exchange rate, and which means that two Bulgarian one Bulgarian lek is equal two Bulgarian one German Deutsche Mark, and for the time being, Bulgaria has this arrangement, which means that we are not able to an independent monetary policy because our exchange rate euro, because when the euro was introduced, the pegged automatically to the euro, substituting the Deutsche Mark. And of course, when in the year 2007, Bulgaria was obliged to do the necessary steps in order to introduce the euro. And it was in the year when the government made the first steps to join and of course, that time coincided with the outbreak of the global financial and economic crisis in the region. Also, the Bulgarian one decided to this process, and in the very last months of the last year, Bulgaria did its best to convince the bank that it's ready the so-called waiting room of the Eurozone. It is the ERM, and Bulgaria was about to do it. And having in mind that Bulgaria is fulfilling all the criteria to join the euro area, except one, Bulgaria was about to complete all the criteria in April this year, but in the country there was some tension because expectation that the fixed exchange rate will change, Bulgarian currency will be devaluated. This kind of the quick accession to the waiting room of the Eurozone and postpone or to slow a little bit down the process until there's a public consensus about this. You have to bear in mind that it is difficult to have a public consensus on joining the euro area because people do have very understandable fears that the eurozone might increase, also nurtured by, I should say, some movements that are supported by countries outside of the European Union. Officially, Bulgaria is willing to be part of the core of the European Union, to be part of the Eurozone, but there are many, I should say, forces in the country and outside of the country that would like a weaker member of the European Union and a weaker member of the Eurozone. So they use such kind of fears in order to postpone governments' plans to join the euro area, and for the time being they're pretty much successful in this because the lack of public consensus actually slowed down the process of the euro area, and there's only one criteria that is still not full. This criteria is mainly to private banks, to private Bulgarian banks that have to better to the requirements for liquidity. These banks are not banks of structural importance, but still the European Central Bank is important of restructuring this in order to be sure that when Bulgaria joins the waiting room of the Eurozone, these two banks will be in a good shape. And because of this delay, nowadays, actually today, the Prime Minister declared that Bulgaria is going to speed up the process of joining, because he pointed at the corona. He pointed at the corona package approved by the Euro area finance minister. Bulgaria was a member of the waiting room of the Eurozone. Bulgaria would be eligible to apply for support bank, and since Bulgaria is still not of the Eurozone, it could finance rescue programs by increasing its debt. And he said, okay, for all the people who are against the entry Eurozone, I would get the Eurozone now and to see that there's a common European response to the coronavirus. And if Bulgaria was part of the Euro today, we would be eligible for European funding. And for the time being, Bulgaria is not part of it, and we have to increase the speed of joining the euro area. And most probably, according to his latest interview, Bulgaria is going to do the necessary measures in order to file the request for joining ERM2 by the end of April, which will be, of course, something to be followed, because I don't believe that having in mind the overall situation in the European Union, such kind of quick decision could be made within a couple of weeks. But we have to bear in mind that it is not only Bulgaria that is willing to accept the euro, it is also Croatia, which means that both countries are about to be closely monitored by the European Central Bank. And I think what will happen will have also direct implications on what will happen with Croatia. The thing here is that both countries will make a perfect case study for countries joining the euro area. what I mean by saying Bulgaria, together with Croatia, will be the first countries to join the euro area by also joining all the new banking authorities that are in the European Union. I mean, the banking union that is currently taking shape in the eurozone, and which is officially not part of the criteria to join the euro area, will be one of the main, how to say, milestones for Bulgaria to join the euro area. So I mean, things will go, which is something that has not been the case so far.
If you talk about the possibilities, I would also like to ask you about the limitations. I mean, there are other countries that joined earlier the European Union, but still are not even applying for the waiting room, as you called it. So what we have seen, I mean, they are obliged to introduce the euro once they have fulfilled all the criteria. And this is part of joining the European Union. Then, as you mentioned, we had the financial and economic crisis, the euro crisis. Then it was clear that it's going to be difficult because there needs to be some consolidation. Now, as you described it, it looks like there is already this consolidation underway, and Bulgaria, Croatia could be this model case. But what about other countries that still have not introduced the euro and are still very skeptical? Is that something that needs to be kept in mind? What the people and their fears, of course, you need to take them into consideration. But wouldn't it be better to explain the possibilities of having the common currency? And do you see that it will be exploited by Czechia, Poland, Hungary, when we have now again a potential economic crisis, in order to prolong joining the common currency?
So it's a different story here, I should say, because in the case of the Czech Republic, in case of Czechia, we have also to take into consideration the overall support for the European Union, which is declining at a very high end, and it will be difficult to speak about joining the euro area when the overall support for the European Union is not that high. In the case of Bulgaria, the European Union still enjoys a very high level of public trust, and the public trust that Bulgarians have towards the European Union, towards the European Commission and the European Parliament is significantly higher than the public trust in national institutions. For different reasons, Bulgarians see the European Union relative to the national government. So when it comes to the common currency, we can say that most of Bulgarians support the European Union, and they could also support joining the euro area in that case. But in the Bulgarian situation, we have also to bear in mind that Bulgaria, as I mentioned, has a fixed currency exchange, the euro, which means that we are only accepting all the decisions that come from Frankfurt, from the European Central Bank, but we are not able to participate in the decision making. And for Bulgaria, it will be really crucial not to be only a receiver of decisions, not to be only on the table, but to be around the table when it comes to taking decisions. While when it comes to countries like Romania or Poland or the Czech Republic, their currencies are not pegged to the euro, which means that they could do some devaluation of their currencies, and they could play with increase the competitiveness of their production. In the case of Bulgaria, we are not able to do this. So from this point of view, Bulgaria joins the euro area as soon as possible. And one more thing that I think is very crucial for Bulgaria is that being at the periphery of the European Union, I mean in geographical terms, but also in economic one, it is really important for Bulgaria to try the core of the European Union. Because if it remains like this, it risks to be to remain this kind of periphery that will not allow the country to catch up with the rest. We have not to forget that Greece is an external border of the European Union. We have to bear in mind that on the other side of the Black Sea coast, we have countries like Russia. We have conflicts in Ukraine. We have conflicts in Syria. And Bulgaria has to be as close to the core of the European Union as possible in order to be able to sustain all the changes that come from the neighboring areas that I just mentioned.
You mentioned the trust in the European institutions is higher than in the national institutions in Bulgaria, something that we can also observe, I would say, even generally within the European Union. But what is striking, if you look at Eurobarometer surveys from last year, the image of the European Union, so the perceived benefit of being a member of the European Union is very, very low in Bulgaria. It's one of the last places in this Eurobarometer survey. How would you explain the difference with the high trust in institutions, the dependency that you have described economically, but then at the same time also this high dissatisfaction with the development of the European Union?
I should say one of the big answers to this question is the fact that we as a society used to have and still have very from the European Union. When Bulgaria joined the European Union in 2007, we somehow expected that that life will change, and it will change not because of the Union, but because of the fact that Union is at home, and somehow expectation that the EU is able to take care of everything in our daily life. That is really understandable. That could be less, how to say, satisfied with how the European Union is working nowadays. And in fact, there are many spheres of the public life that are not influenced by the European Union, but the European Union. This, I mean, feels like education, feels like healthcare. People do expect that being in the European Union should do something for the healthcare system, or should do more for the education. And these two spheres are, of course, maybe the education is much more integrated into the European Union agenda because of programs like Erasmus and all the exchanges that are happening. But when it comes to healthcare system, people tend to believe that it could be improved by the European Union somehow, and they don't think that it is a national obligation to improve the state of the healthcare system, but they see, okay, that because we are in the European Union, it should be the European Union who should take care of our healthcare system. And I think this is why people are not that satisfied, because there's a huge discrepancy between the expectations and the real functions of the European Union.
So a problem that we can see throughout the member states, that it is not really clear who makes these decisions, and that each and every member state is actually participating in shaping this, that there is not some supranational decision-making body that decides for each and every member country, but that the directives and regulations are decided together with the member states. And that brings us also to a point like, okay, we had now apparently a late night consensus on how to deal with the ensuing economic crisis that is going to follow on a European level. But we could see that there is again a rift between the member states on what the right mechanisms to do that would be. So there was discussions about Euro bonds again, or then they have been called Corona bonds. Now apparently the consensus seems to be that there will be funds used from the ESM, there will be funds used that have been installed during the Euro crisis. What would you say, on the one hand side, shows this consensus? Is this something that it's again something that would be the smallest common denominator, or is it something that is a true European consensus and will help in the future? And what would you say would be a better approach? Also keeping in mind that you mentioned the EU should do something for the healthcare system according to the people on the streets, so to say, which might be also part of that approach in the end. And could this help to improve the image of the European Union in Bulgaria, but also in other member states?
Very good question, because speaking about the common European response, we're asked, or we are always asking about the solidarity and whether the EU is able to give a single answer that is supported by all member states, or there will be a further division between the northern countries and the European South that is traditionally calling for more budget flexibility. And for the time being, it seems that this kind of has one major goal behind the goal to support all the economies that have been hit very seriously. But the thing is that I think one of the major thing here is that it will serve as a very strong signal, showing that despite the differences, the EU is able to take common decisions in times of uncertainty, in times of very huge pressure to the national governments. And this message is very important because it comes with a little delay, I should say, because when the crisis started to be very visible in Italy, the European leadership was entirely focused on how to tackle the new migrant crisis that was happening at the borders between Turkey and Greece, and to some extent between Turkey and Bulgaria. Because in the beginning of March, the EU leadership was paying a visit to Greece, to Bulgaria, and at that time, Italy was already experiencing a huge pressure on its healthcare system, and the EU was not in place to respond at that time. Later than never, I should say, the European Union, or at least the Euro area countries' response. Of course, I'm sure that it will be difficult to speak about the so-called mutualization, to speak about common bonds that are issued by the European, or at least by the Euro area in the next future. But the fact that we have package right now is a very strong message, and I think it is a message that comes to show that at the end of the day, the European Union is able to respond to external shocks. But also to pinpoint that the European Union is part of the global economy. So we have also to consider that there are some major economic powers like the United States and China that have a huge influence on how the European economy is doing. And just a comparison, it was the year when we witnessed the SARS outbreak in China. At that time, the share of China in the global economy was about 4%. Nowadays, the share of China in the global economy is close to 20%. So we have to think about the European Union as part of the global system, and no matter what kind of rescue package will be put in place, the European Union is very much dependent on what happens in other regions, what happens in China, what happens in the United States, and we could only hope that the situation economically and also will improve sooner in the China, because all the economies are so much linked to each other that a single response will be not enough. And by saying this, I have to also to mention the fact that the crisis might be an opportunity for the European Union to try to diversify the value chains, because nowadays what we see in the United States and in the European Union, we have a huge dependency on China when it comes to the global value chains. But maybe in the near future, companies will try to modify their value more is produced in Central and Southeastern Europe, in order to decrease the dependency on third countries like China, like the United States, etc.
Okay. Maybe there is this opportunity, but now that you mentioned the figures, I started to wonder. I mean, if we look at now the possibility that China has to contain the virus, the possibilities apparently to kickstart back the economy, the numbers of new infections seem to be very, very low. It doesn't matter if they are true or not. They are getting back on track economically, which means that they will have a start long before the European Union and long before the United States can maybe react to this. Will that ultimately lead to a further increase of the global share of the Chinese economy? And what will that also mean for the One Belt One Road initiative, especially for the Black Sea region and Central and Southeast Europe?
It's a very good question, and actually we at the Economic Policy Institute were planning to do a study on how China is perceived in our region, in Southeast Europe and in the Black Sea region, in order to see what is the real perception about China. Because when it comes to Bulgaria, there's too much talk about not a single big Chinese investment in the country. And we wanted to see how is actually China seen in the country, and not only in the country but in all the other countries, because as we know, Germany is taking over the presidency of the European Council in the second part of this year, and the main event that was, or maybe it is still on the agenda, was to hold EU-China summit. And we wanted to the Bulgarian position, what will be the Romanian, the Greek position, etc. But it is really difficult to hold a study or to try to find what will be the answer right now, because the global order is shifting right now, that we cannot easily say what will be the perception about China nowadays, what will be the future of the One Belt Initiative? Because I think countries will be very attentive when it comes to continuing in the same way they work so far, which means not only political relations but also economic ones. So for countries outside of the European Union, I think there might be some acceleration of the relations between China and the respective country, but this is going to happen mainly on the information or perception point of view. I mean, how is filling the void that is happening because of the lack of European. By saying that, most probably there will be more chances for the countries in Central and Southeastern Europe to take some part of the production that currently takes place in China. I don't see it to happen in the next couple of months. I think it will be a process. It will be a gradual process that will happen over the next years, when owners and managers of big companies will start to look back at the crisis and will start to think how to diversify and to decrease. In the short run, of course, China is going to maybe to increase its share, because at that time nobody in Europe or in the United States will be working. So it might be the case that this bigger role in the global economy. But I think depending on the spread of the virus, all the EU and also the United States might experience a very strong revival afterwards, when the economy is expected to bounce back. And after such a contraction this year, we expect a very quick recovery if the pandemic is put under control. We expect a very quick recovery afterwards. But when it comes to all the countries, maybe except, of course, they're relatively small countries, and the countries that are relatively open open in terms of trade, which means that they're very dependent on what happens not only in the country but on what happens all over, and they have low resilience towards external shocks. When I mean external shocks, I'm willing to quote a study that was this week by the EBRD on the resilience of countries in the region in terms of several external shocks. Let me first point at tourism. Countries like Croatia, Montenegro, and Greece are very much dependent on tourism. They will be hit by the overall situation, and they could expect a shrinkage in this sector in their economy. Second, it is the remittances. Remittances play a huge role in all the countries in the region, even in countries like Romania and Bulgaria. But according to this study that I mentioned, the countries that are going to be hit more considerably by the drop in remittances this year might be Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Kosovo, Ukraine, and Moldova. And when it comes to the global value chains, as already discussed, the countries that have the lowest resilience towards change in global value chains are countries like Hungary, Slovenia, the Slovak Republic, and to some extent Bulgaria and Romania. I mean, the countries that are very much involved into the trade that takes place in the European Union.
One last small question: when you mentioned that there is a possibility that there is going to be a change in the global economy, bringing production back to certain areas, bringing it back to the European Union, bringing it back to the region, some member states, would you say that there is a danger that that also would leads to more national approaches when it comes to the reactions after the pandemic, not so much economically, but rather politically. Then that there's going to be this approach that we can see sort of America first, and then it's going to be Bulgaria first, and I don't know, Germany first, and we need to take care of us before we can think about the other countries within the European Union. In other words, do you see a danger, because you've been describing it rather optimistically in a sense, how the European Union will get out of this, but do you see that there is a danger that after the first initial solidarity, that countries might be prone to first look at themselves, and this might also have an influence on European integration?
I think it's a natural process that individuals, and in this case countries, will be much more prone to think firstly about themselves. And in this situation, it is very important that the solidarity between the European Union countries is communicated. Time being, I think everything that's already done is lacking publicity, and it is really difficult to convince the Union is here to support all the countries if they about this. In the very first days of the outbreak in Italy, there were media reports about support from Russia, about support coming from China, and there was no information. It has been already supported by countries like Germany, by etc. So I think the EU has to be much more vocal in the things the EU is doing, in order to show that the EU is here and it is here to support the member states. At national level, I think there will be some, I hope so, short-term national approach, because political leaders are at the end of the day elected by their local population, so not by the population in other European countries. And of course, they will try to benefit from the current situation by trying to wake up the national or the nationalistic voices in the respective countries. But I think it's smart enough to make its contribution more visible. It will be able to overcome this short-term rise in nationalistic way of thinking, which I think it is inevitable. But if the European institutions are strong enough and continue informing about what they are doing, it will be something that will pay off at the end of the day. And we have also to bear in mind that it is not a very, very huge expectations from the European Union, but also all the other countries. I mean, the public healthcare systems all over are not covered by the European Union. So why should we ask about a common European approach if we all, like countries, like societies, are not solidarity to give up sovereignty in the public healthcare system to the European Union? We are keeping the healthcare system as a national, how to say, as a national good. At the same time, when there's a crisis, we think of unit that has to fix our healthcare system. So we have to be very clear on this, that it could not be the European Union the panacea to all the problems that we have, unless we are not willing to give up some of our how to say sectors to a more cooperation on a European level. And I think it is also a good chance that the EU is getting to know that it it is in a sense that it is still not having a common approach towards such kind of overwhelming uh, um, crises that are spreading so quickly and that are spreading all over. I mean, uh, during the European Union was about to fail. Many people at the time predicted the Eurozone is going to break up and the European Union is going to diminish. But what we saw that nowadays the European Union has different kind of mechanisms in order to support countries, to support member states, and every single crisis is making the European Union a little bit more prepared for the next crisis. As you mentioned, some of the funds that are going to be used for tackling the crisis are coming from all these mechanisms that were created after the Euro crisis, which means that it might be too optimistic from my side, but I think all the crises show that the European Union is much more stronger than expected. And at the end of the day, it is more consolidated and more prepared to tackle common challenges.
I really would like to, first of all, thank you very much, Yasen, for taking the time and talking to us. Then second, I would love to share your optimism. It's true the European Union always emerged stronger from crises, but there are member states like yours that have basically, since they joined the European Union, only experienced it in crisis mode. And I hope that we can return somehow back to normalcy, not only given the current situation with the pandemic, but also when we speak about European integration. I think it's our job to inform more about the challenges, but also the opportunities. I think EPI is doing a great job. I hope that we can continue and deepen the cooperation between the EPI and IDM in the future, because I think when this crisis is over, it's going to be more than ever necessary that we cooperate on a European level, that we cooperate on a regional level, and that we do not isolate ourselves, be it to tackle a virus, but also be it when it comes to the political development within the countries. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time. And to all our viewers, we are going to continue to do our live stream sessions after Easter. So I wish you happy Easter holidays for the time being. And if you like what we do here, subscribe to our channel and share the link of this video, which will be available on demand afterwards. Yasen, thank you very much and best regards.
Thank you very much for having me here, and let me wish subscribers and all the people who are with us this afternoon to wish you all health, resilience, and positive Easter moments.
Thank you, Yasen.